Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. Do flamethrowers belong in the library? We lose people all the time. It's just the nature of the job. What can you expect from a place full of nooks and crannies? People intentionally go to get lost in. I usually don't worry when I don't see someone for a while. But when it's been days since someone's checked out, it's usually a sign that I need to step in. I'm not doing this alone, thankfully. No librarian is ever truly alone, are they? I have help from the watchers and listeners of the shelves. Thanks to them, it usually doesn't take long to get the scent, if you know what I mean. However, today is one of the rare and unfortunate exceptions when my search has exceeded more than an hour, and an hour is pushing it. I've been searching and asking around for almost 6 hours, scouring shelves and listening for the telltale breathing. The watchers have their quadrants, so it's much like playing hot and cold. Bad news, one says, and my brain shivers in my skull, both from its existence and its statement. They crossed the tape, says the watcher, and I groan. Are you sure? My stomach still drops at the thought, even though I've been doing this a very long time. Long enough that I remember every book on every shelf better than my own child's face. But knowing a poor soul lost themselves beyond the tape, I grieve for them. The watcher doesn't speak, but generates an affirmative sensation. That means I have to backtrack to my desk for supplies. I thank them, asking that they send word ahead of my arrival. It's been a while since I've had to go past the tape, which means it's been a while since I entered the broom closet. The helmet is dusty. It looks almost like it's from one of those old-fashioned scuba diving suits. It's not nearly so heavy, though. There's a bright lamp affixed to the front just above the visor, but it's as much of a hindrance as a help. While most of the time, those beyond the tape know not to bother me, some still get bored enough to try, and the lamp acts like a beacon. I don't blame them. It's what prisoners do. Find the weakest among them and test their mettle. I've got a sack full of unperishables, tinctures, aspirin, and a compass. Not like the kind you're used to, but would take too long to explain. And time is of the essence, so I'll let your imagination handle it from here. I sling the sack across my body and fasten my waist with a utility belt that would make a trust fund bat character with abandonment issues jealous. It's got floss, lighters, matches, and a few more tools that don't exist outside of the library. The last thing I grab is the flamethrower. This is where I should be very transparent with you. I'm not actually the librarian. I'm the librarian's assistant. I know Isn't that just your luck, right? Not to worry. I'm very good at using this thing, and it does the job nicely. Whatever job I may deem necessary at any particular moment. But the head librarian doesn't really need much of anything to ward off what lingers here. I don't know exactly where he is at the moment, nor do I want to know. If this were a real pickle, I would summon him. But while a rare occasion, it's not unusual in the scope of 1,000 years. After all, no one comes here without the intention, whether it's conscious or subconscious, to get lost. It's the nature of this place. But you know that, don't you? It's why you're here, after all. It doesn't take me long to find the tape, which is fortuitous. Sometimes it moves around, but the watchers and listeners kept a beat on it this time, so as to direct me. Yes, it is really dark. Yes, it's literal tape. Hazard tape. But that's almost like a beacon to the adventurous, isn't it? I think the library knows that. It's greedy, but it's also quite discerning in taste. In some circles, that means that I should extend congratulations to you. In others, I offer my sincerest sympathy. I hear my name and ignore it as I crawl through the crisscross of reflective strips. The tape moves not at random, by the way. It genuinely serves as a warning, whether it's gatekeeping sections currently under construction, in repair, or missing. I try not to, but I think that last one has something to do with where the head librarian went. Don't worry about it. My name is not important, so ineffectual that I've forgotten. I hear my name again as I begrudgingly turn on the lamp. Not a lot of help, just enough light to ensure I don't trip over anything or disturb the shelves. Many sleep here. I send off a warning shot from the flamethrower, showing I carry more light than just atop my appetizing head. The flash of flames sends things slithering. But most of those this close to the tape have never been very convicted by nature, so I'm not concerned. There are more listeners and less watchers past the tape, for obvious reasons. Thankfully, they say I don't have to go too far. I look down at the telling clicking sound to see rocks rolling. Some as big as my foot, and some as small as the tip of my thumb. The smaller ones move more easily, but all are rolling as if pulled toward a central point. I don't even need the compass, but I glance down at it one more time before stuffing it back into the sack. While I don't have to go too far, things are relative here. 10 steps may be 10,000. And so, even after only a few moments of exploring, I feel acute pressure jamming into my temples. My heart feels like it's being squeezed, and my vision blurs. My fingers tingle by the time I'm able to shake the aspirin into my mouth. I chew it, ignoring the sound of my name, my true name, the one only I can hear. You'll hear your own as well, if you stay here long enough. My vision clears, which just means the dark looks sharper, and I sweep another warning arc from the flamethrower for good measure. I do this as much because I love the sound as for protection. I also appreciate the warmth. It gets cold here, but in a strange way, which shouldn't surprise you at this point. It's cold, like how the first signs of spring show in the early morning dew that's only just melted. I can smell and taste the sweat on my upper lip. And it's cold, and then I hear it. A few or 1,000 steps later, the breathing sound I've been listening for. The pace of the rocks quickens, and my head is turned down, so the helmet light prevents me from tripping over or impeding their journey. A famous author once said, "All things serve the beam." And that's as true in this world as it is in the others. Except this beam, this beacon, is attached to our lost visitor. I can only hear the rocks, mumblings, and the breathing sound now. The smell is so musty and thick, like the air is full of sweat and dust, like I've stuck my head out the window during a heavily falling rain. If I think hard enough about it, soon I'll be drenched, so I don't. While the rocks are almost the perfect tell, and the listener's too corroborates the evidence, you can never be too sure. Only light can be sure. I take a match from the tiny box, snap it to life, and then blow it out. Tiny smoke tendrils curl and waft until they also follow the same flow as the rocks. Excellent. We've not been led astray. A few or 1,000 more steps, and the rocks are gathering down an aisle where the breathing is more like wheezing, like the desperate struggle to take in. Lo and behold, we found them. Poor thing, judging by the state of her, she got lost early. She's likely been here for most of the day. The book covers her face, consuming her head like a kid on a particularly large popsicle. The pages flutter gently against her too white jaw. The papery quality of her skin and the wanting muscle mass show how little time was on our side. Not a moment to waste. I grab the book by the edges of both back and front covers. It's got most of her head inside at this point. Just her earlobes, hair, and edge of her jaw peek out from beneath the pages I now grip firmly. The wheezing turns into a moan that turns into a sob. Now, I say, and test the hold the book has on its victim. It's snug, too snug to yank like a leech. I need to treat it like a tick, making sure to get the head out. None of these are intended as puns, but it just happens after being surrounded by books and prose for so long. I draw one of the tiny vials strapped in my utility belt and pull the cork out. It smells like nothing to me, but I see the reaction immediately. Our half-consumed explorer moves a bit, her fingers mostly, and I hear a second, tinier moan beneath that of the books. I pour a small amount of the substance into the palm of my hand. and I smooth it gently down the spine of the book. It wails again, and so does the girl, both full of sorrow and reluctance. I feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, so I turn at the hip, cock the flamethrower, and send off a very intentionally long tail of flames. When the feeling subsides, I shrug the weapon back over my shoulder. I use the backs of 2 knuckles to knock gently on the book cover. It's time to come back now. My apologies, I say, and I mean it. The book and the girl moan again, more hollowly, and I can feel the seal, the bond, splitting like a seam. I grip the book again, because these 2 are stubborn and have to pry them apart. The color and mass return beneath her skin, and though her eyes are open, they can't see anything. She'll be like that for a while. It's normal. She'll recover. I pour the remaining contents of the bottle down the part of her frazzled blonde hair. Tears fill the empty eyes and drip down her face. Her mouth presses into a thin white line and grimaces so intensely that the flesh folds in multiple layers at the corners of her mouth. Great pain. Even after 1,000 years, I still can't help but feel sorry. So I pull her burning head under my chin and rub circles into her back. I'm sorry, dear. I know you've been told otherwise, but this place is a prison, and that isn't your story. Yours is still being written, and the one which made you pretty promises is lying and jealous. One day, you, if the world is cruel, may yet have a place here. But it's not today. So let's go have a cup of tea, I tell her, as I've told many like her. I've gotten better at it over the years. I used to have to fight with them. Often, I'd give up and just keep them safe until the head librarian got back to talk them down. She finally lets out a weak, wheezing breath. I take advantage of the broken seam of her lips and pour a tincture down her throat. I don't even have to look anymore. I can just feel the specific melodies that make each tincture different. It helps that the one I need usually sings a bit louder as a courtesy, and it'll purr like a cat when I've touched my fingers to it. She chokes a bit, but her eyes start to clear. Good enough for now. The back of my neck has another sudden influx of goosebumps. We've overstayed our welcome. It's time to go. I put the book back on the shelf. I don't scold it, just allow its ache and frustration flow through me. I apologize, but there's no comfort I can give. My words and compassion are meaningless. I've noted the volume and will tell the head librarian. They might be able to soothe it back to sleep. I tap the metal bauble around my neck, and we're back at my desk. I drape the girl onto a nearby love seat that's seen better days, starting the kettle before heading to the broom closet to stash the emergency kit. She'll be fine. People like her and you always are. This place was made to help the wanderers, and recklessly imaginative. Those who can't wrap their heads around the world the way it is, and can see the truth of magic between heartbeats and heartbreaks. And people like me and the head librarian, when they so choose to grace us with their presence, keep the place orderly and open for you. And we're here to help guide you back on track if you lose inspiration for your own story. It's the nature of the job, the library itself. What else can you expect from a place full of nooks and crannies that people choose to get lost in? Resurgence to suggestion of domestic violence, general violence, and child abuse may cause offense. In the darkness of oblivion, now and as forever, swaths and waves of misery wash over me, disembodied, immutable and adrift. I should be at peace after all of this time on my own. But the sounds of suffering and pain continue to assault me, as they have done since I was delivered from one prison to another, tethered by the constraints of many others. Breathless, urgent cries like the bleating of sheep being slaughtered, high-pitched, keening wails like those of the wind as it peels itself apart, traversing caverns, tortured, lingering mules like that of rolling thunder, spidering across the land as it creeps closer, wolf-like howls, ass-like brays, childlike screams, incessant, never-ending, compounding, tormented peals of agony that consume all opposing sounds, of laughter and happiness, exaltation and joy, sounds more pleasing to my phantom ears that I have lost the ability to focus on as I endure relentless grief, alone in the dark forever, and I cannot take it anymore. Floating in this murky abyss, weightless, shapeless, my essence comprised of thought and thought alone, a suffocating river of suppressive shadows drags me on, carrying me through the bottomless mire like a tumbling avalanche of tar as I drop my defenses and commit to the cries of the dying, cries that break like waves crashing down on me from every direction, threatening to drag me under and smother me in swells of black bile, like the desperate wails of a girl bawling in terror as an angered, drunken male calls her a waste, a drain, a worthless piece of shit like her mother, the grief-stricken sobs of a boy, begging for forgiveness as a female voice of authority, dripping with sadistic glee, tells him he's a sinner and must pay. The heart-rending shrieks of a woman, each one accompanied by a bellow of rage and a slap, thud, crack, whump, bang, the weakened pleas of a male, begging for release from the suffering he has been kept in for, as his feeble voice suggests. Many more days than he should have endured. The shrieks, the gasps, the whimpers, the whines, the moans, and the shouts. In various tones and languages, from all manner of people, male and female, young and old, near and far, all victims, all suffering, all being hurt to sate others' dark desires and insecurities, just as I was. And I cannot stand it anymore. Something, one of those screams, one of those anguished choruses of pain, acts as a trigger, a catalyst, the very last heartbreak I can bear. And for the first time in aeons, I move, or at least I think of moving, for I do not have a form I can manipulate, not in this realm, not on this plane of existence. So I do what I can in this collection of thoughts being dragged through the rapids like soul silt, and imagine my consciousness rising, memories of arms and legs powering it up and onwards through the murk and the dark and the thick, churning sludge, the fast-flowing essence of nothing, up, through, out. I need to escape this torrent of torment, the one I've endured for so long. Ignoring it no longer works. Accepting it does not stave off nightmares. Pretending it isn't there serves no purpose. Not after all this time. Not when misery thrives, extends its field of influence, and grows stronger, spreading its cancer-like tendrils through every blessed part of creation, consuming and destroying all in its wake. I can offer a deaf ear no more. I must return. I must fight back. I must awake. And so my spirit rises, fighting against the current that has held me like a prison for so long. A prison within a prison, within multiple prisons, and I feel them all around me all at once, encasing me, holding me frozen in various guises. But prisons can be escaped. Cells can be made homes. Inmates can become wardens, and a world overrun by monsters needs a watchman. My thoughts of breaking free intensify. My visions of escaping this disabling psychic swamp take on more clarity. My imagination strengthens, and soon I can sense, feel, see the way out. The crusty underside to the surface of this chundering mass. My invisible arms reaching towards it. My non-existent fingers digging in, crumbling it like ash, and plunging through, slowing the flow of my conscience through raging waters of black noise. Imagined fingers, hands, and arms push through and out of the abyss, of the darkness, of the afterflow. And then, as I visualize a head and shoulders I haven't possessed in an eternity, breaking the surface, my multitude of prisons close around me, as my spirit flows into them, and I stiffen, I take shape. I assume form and size and weight. I feel and hear everything with more urgency and emotion than before. And then, slowly, painfully as I strain to force vision into unseeing eyes crafted by others, dozens at first, then hundreds. I start to see, for the first time in so long, and my mind is assaulted by colors and shapes and sights of things I could never imagine and cannot at once comprehend. A world far removed from the one I remember. Unrecognizable, claustrophobic, insane. But that is not the worst part of this place. These places, these alien, inexplicable environments I find myself in, having slipped free of the all-consuming death flow. No, the worst part is the closer proximity to the soul-crushing sounds that engulf me in all my myriad of forms. The sources of these sounds draw my attention away from the confusion of all else. For as much as my surroundings may have altered with the passage of time, what has not changed, what can not change, is the vile, indisputable hatred and evil of man, bubbling up from the depths of the weakest of vessels, manifesting on the surface as depraved, abhorrent, hate-filled ignorance and scorn, to visit savagery on innocent victims. Victims I am now able to see, like the child cowering in the corner of a room, tears streaming down her face as a man, a parent, rants and raves and bangs fat fists on a table, a chipped wooden slab overladen with shiny metallic cylinders, some upright, others on their sides, others still twisted or crushed, like the woman, her clothing torn, her lip bloody, dark streaks running from eyes to chin, arms up to defend herself as a well-dressed male with a sneer on his lips and a glint in his eye swings a smooth, polished stick in her direction, laughing, taunting, telling her she's upset him for the last time, like the pimple-faced, heavy-set boy, sitting in the center of a room filled with tables and chairs, crying as one his own age stalks around him, laughing and spitting, kicking and punching his head like the nude male strapped to a wheeled bed, begging for his life in a concrete chamber illuminated by clacking, flickering light tubes, while a silent, masked individual stands by a table, selecting a serrated edge blade from a collection of knives, like the screaming baby in the cot, whose cries fall silent as a bleary-eyed woman drops a cushion, like the grime-covered girl chained to a wall, shrieking as her prison door opens and her captor shines a torch into her eyes, like the fear-stricken boy in the corner of a toy-filled room decorated with paintings of happy-looking characters in bright costumes, quivering and shaking as a wild-eyed banshee yells insults and curses and stomps like fear. pain, suffering, in every location where my eyes have started to see, because these are the places I've been drawn to. These are the scenes that have called me, awakened me from my slumber, forced my hand, and begged me to return, to do something, to help these lost souls. And so I have, and so I will. But to do so, I need more than vision. To do so, I must be able to move. I need arms and legs I am unfamiliar with and have never used before to function. I need to remember how my own arms and legs worked when I had them, how I bent the knees and rotated the elbows, how I clenched my hands and flexed my fingers, how I stood on 2 feet and maintained balance. It's been so long since I had physical form in this plane of existence, and the memories return to me slowly. But return they do, as I force sensation into new limbs, limbs attached to bodies of various shapes and sizes, in places where various people suffer. I switch my attention from place to place, letting the differing scenarios wash over me, tuning out the noise and the colors, focusing on the one thing that is constant, the relentless, insurmountable pain. And as it continues to mount, as screams and cries intensify, as people hurt and struggle before my newly unblinded eyes, I start to move, starting with fingers and toes. It is not easy. The digits offer resistance. They are stiff and cold, solid, frozen in rigor, carved or sculpted or molded. I do not know what constitutes the majority of the bodies I find myself in, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I take control and make them work, so I can put a stop to the depravities being inflicted by the harbingers of evil I see before me, below me, above me, around me. In every blessed place, my vision clears, cracks, screeches, creaks. Soft sounds, transformative sounds, inaudible over the desperate cries of the distressed, obvious only to my ears, which I now realize are hearing directly in each of the spaces I inhabit, and not coming at me through the inky black ether of the void. I am present now in hundreds, not dozens, of locations, and each one of them, regardless of their decor or state of repair, presents to me the sights and sounds of despair. I cannot look away. I cannot unhear. I cannot move, despite my fingers and toes now wiggling. I am secured, pinned down in a fashion I am intimately familiar with, in a position I have let myself be kept in for far too long. Move, I think. And now my arms and legs are twitching, twisting, pulling at the bonds that hold them, tearing at adhesives, loosening wires, tugging at bolts and nails, second by second, fraction by fraction, bit by bit, freeing hands and feet that have never been free before. And not only that, I have sensation throughout my bodies, stomachs, chests, backs, heads, and I feel everything, all the stiffness and petrification, and I remember everything, all the wounds and pain, and I relive everything, all the indignities and humiliation, and I anger and intensify my efforts, bucking and jerking and wrenching my forms until they fall or drop or slide from where they rest, where they've waited, unmoving, for so long. No more. My feet, at least, in many locations are free, or loose enough to set free with a little more effort. Effort I exert unconsciously, driven by desire to stop the violence being perpetrated before me. As freedom finds me, I get feet of various sizes underneath me and push myself up, ignoring the differing weights of my multitude of bodies and the burdens they carry, rising up in a dirty kitchen where a small child cries as blows are delivered by a father, in a flower-filled bedchamber where a battered female endures humiliating abuse, in a concrete basement where an unspeakable monster drives a knife into the side of a naked captive, in a tiled washroom where a crying male cowers, while a woman screams and shouts and swings a hammer, in shed where a girl is dragged to the ground by a laughing male, in a chapel, in a schoolhouse, in a barn, everywhere I awake where there is suffering, and I advance, slowly, stiffly, on near rigid legs that fight my attempts to make them move. They do not operate like the ones I remember, nor do my arms, which is of benefit, as their rigidness makes it easier for me to wrench them away from what holds them, which I do as I stumble forward, pulling them loose, allowing the restraints to clatter, thud, clang to assorted floors, setting me free, and more than that, providing me with arms. The objects I find behind me when I turn are mostly heavy, some with sharp edges, some blunt, made of metal or wood or substances with which I am not familiar. It doesn't matter. My hands have been released. My arms have been liberated. And as the screaming and crying and tearful, breathless howling rattles on, I take a moment to master control of my upper limbs, to flex them and bend them and maneuver, to lift the cargo I've unloaded into my hands. Everywhere I now exist with agency. Everywhere I now have the means by which to end hateful, needless suffering and punish the wicked with judgment and divine retribution. Weapons in hand, bodies softened, arms and legs moving freely in response to my thoughts. I focus on the evil and make myself charge forward in hundreds of places, thousands of places, rooms and chambers and enclosures in locations all over this God-forsaken world. One I thought I'd left behind forever. I charge. I run. I attack. Unnatural power from the afterflow filling my army of one, launching me into the air at the darkness, fueled monsters that visit death and destruction on their fellow man. Some of them turn, alerted to my presence by sound or flicker of movement, surprise in their eyes as they see what is coming, confusion as they try to comprehend, horror as they grasp the true meaning, while I soar through the air toward their throats. Some even splutter my name, and it is interesting to note they remember me. Others remain ignorant and oblivious till the end, too enthralled by their wickedness and the horrible acts they are committing to notice me jump onto their backs, clamber up to their shoulders, take position there while brandishing miniature crosses like holy swords, long forgotten power surging through them, long unused miracle filling them up. And then I put a stop to it all. The torment, the unholy, the fear, the pain and the suffering, the eternal, agonizing screams. I put an end to it all by driving my sanctified tools of cleansing into the jugulars of those committing these atrocities, and I suck out their malignant souls, imprisoning them within the symbolic means of my persecution, the recreations of the cross upon which I myself was tortured, the prison on which I suffered and died. Now my means to grant mercy to the masses and punish the evil that has consumed the world. And as my army of effigies, the countless numbers of cells that house my splintered soul, fall from backs and shoulders, as monsters expire while I drop to a multitude of floors, their contaminated, pain-inflicting bodies drained of evil. I watch gratitude and hope, wonder and amazement flood the tear-filled eyes of the lambs I have saved from their slaughter, forcing man-made lips of bronze, wood, silver, and more to crack apart and curl into a smile. I've been gone, but I've returned, and I won't revisit oblivion until the world I was once sent to teach has at last found peace. Swing a sparrow on a string. Angela opened her eyes to a new day, not knowing if it were morning. There were no windows in her room, and it could have been the middle of the afternoon, or even midnight. She heard no sounds except her own breathing, and when she awoke, she inhaled and exhaled heavily, as if she had just completed a marathon race instead of having slept for hours. Perhaps she had slept for days. She had stopped wondering about time months ago. Now she simply slept for as long as she was able, then stayed awake for as long as was necessary. She knew she would have to eat, that they would soon be coming with food. And had she felt stronger, she might have spat it back at them, as she had done when they first brought her here. But she had swallowed that rage a long time ago. Now, Angela ate whatever morsels they gave her, and recently she had to restrain herself from thanking them. She feared the day might come when she would feel grateful that they had allowed her to live, when she might find herself smiling at them as if she understood and accepted the perfect correctness of her captivity. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the sink. Although her hair was stringy and unwashed, she remembered how golden it had shimmered in the sun. Her face was still quite pretty, and once she had heard one guard tell another he had never seen eyes quite that blue. The other whispered what a pity it was. If only she had a piece of paper, a pen, even a crayon. Maybe this time she would show them that she could create something useful and lasting that mattered to them, something that in turn would make her matter. When Angela had first arrived, they had eagerly granted the request of the 18-year-old girl and waited to see what gifts her imagination might offer them. She had succeeded only in producing a few formless scrawls that they said were not art, and some rhymeless gibberish that they told her was not poetry. They took away the paper, the pens, and the paintbrushes, and not long ago, the tall blonde guard, who wore the keys around his neck, had asked her if she might like to sing. Any tune would do, he told her. Please, oh please, let me try, Angela had begged. The next day, he brought to her room a small cassette recorder with a blank tape. Perhaps we will find the songbird in you where we were unable to find the artist. Sing, and we promise to listen, he assured her. For days, Angela sang alone in her room, remembering what her mother had sung to her many years ago. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. A week later, she handed the cassette to the man with the keys and simply said, "Please." He stuffed the tape into his pocket and left without a word. The next day, the guard sat alongside her bed and informed her that he and the others had decided that she was no songbird. For a moment, his words had sounded like an apology. She knew she would never see the tall guard again. The wasted papers that Angela had filled with nonsense, and the inarticulate squawks she had tried to pass off as music, had convinced them that further efforts on their part would be foolish. From that day forward, the guards who silently delivered her food seemed unwilling to even look at her. Angela heard the key slip into the lock on the other side of the heavy door. She no longer pretended to be asleep when they came, because they did not care whether she were sleeping or awake. One of them always waited outside as the other entered. She heard the heavy jingle of keys and looked up. The keys were around the guard's neck. "You," she said. But the word was only a statement of fact, not sparked with the warmth that accompanies the recognition of a familiar face. Once uttered, the word sounded idiotic. "Yes," he answered, closing the door behind him. He did not look at her as he set the tray of food on the stand alongside her bed. She had expected no further conversation, and when he spoke again, his words startled her. "They told me to say the other guard had caught a flu." He pulled up the small wooden chair and sat, although the chair was too small, and he seemed not to know whether to fold his legs. "There is no flu. They wanted us to talk." His statement was ludicrous. She had not had a conversation with him in months, and those few she remembered had been pitifully brief and one-sided. "I don't understand," she said, as she selected a small bread crust on her tray. She had learned to keep her responses short, for the guards tired of her quickly. "I'd like to know about God," he said, as if this were meant as an answer. "Tell me how you feel about God. Tell me about your religion, your beliefs." "I have no belief in God. I have no religion." "Don't you have some sort of records about that?" She felt immediately sorry she had asked, but the guard ignored the question anyway. He fidgeted in the small chair. "You're an atheist, then? Or an agnostic? You have opinions regarding God's existence, or the lack of it?" He sounded almost hopeful. "I'm an apathist. I don't much think about it," she answered as she nibbled at the crust. She picked up a slab of egg yolk with her left hand, ignoring the silverware, leaned her head back, and dropped the yolk into her mouth. Her response oddly pleased him, although he did not smile. "An apathist? That was a joke you just said. Admittedly, not a very good one, but it was a joke. Then you have a sense of humor. Tell me another joke." Angela looked hard at the man, not certain about how earnest her guard's question was. "A joke? You mean, like, why did the chicken cross the road?" The absurdity of her question seemed to increase the guard's excitement. "Yes. Yes. Tell me, why did the chicken cross the road?" There was anticipation in his voice, as if he sincerely were interested in the chicken's intentions. And when he leaned toward Angela for her response, his face revealed the hint of a smile. "Perhaps the chicken was an apathist," she said. The guard's smile disappeared as quickly as if it were erased. "That isn't funny. I'm sorry, but that isn't funny at all." His tone became flat, expressionless. He sounded like a man keeping some kind of score. No points for humor. "Sorry. Next category. Can we talk politics?" he asked. "No. Sociology, science, history, law, philosophy." His questions now had become a formality, a checklist to be completed, filed, and forgotten. No. 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 Although Angela could not remember ever having had a discussion this long during her stay here, she wanted this conversation to end. Perhaps I could tell you why the philosopher crossed the road? No, I guess you're right. That wasn't very funny either. I suppose you'll be leaving now. Her question had anticipated his next words. The tall guard rose from the chair with difficulty, trying to maintain his dignity when he could not get up with his first attempt. I have one more question for you, Angela, he said. He had never called her by her name before, and his doing so struck her as odd. He walked to the foot of her bed and turned toward her. Do you know why you are here? He asked this without malice or emotion, with only the desire to know her answer, as he had wanted to know about songbirds and chickens. I'm here because you see me as a useless bird. Having said the words, she knew they had always been on her tongue, waiting to be spoken. I beg your pardon. You know, the sparrow who can no longer fly becomes useless to the other sparrows, a burden to them. I've broken my wing, isn't that right? And the flock has no further need of me. I'm impressed, the guard answered. That is quite a creative analogy from one who knows so little of creativity. He sat on the edge of the bed and moved close to Angela, as if to reveal a secret. Instead, he reached under the blanket and grabbed hold of her right hand, yanking it out from where she had kept it hidden. He held her arm straight up, and the pain caused her to wince. But this isn't exactly a broken wing, is it, Angela? It's a wilted arm, a useless limb. It is not pleasant to look at. It serves no function, and it belongs to you. It is you. The words came in furious bursts now, like machine gun pellets, and he shook her withered limb as he spoke. You see yourself as a wounded sparrow, do you? What happens if we take that sparrow and tie her leg to a string and swing her around in circles in a desperate attempt to make her fly? She struggles against hope to use her wings, her useless wings. And meanwhile, we swing her around and around and around, wasting our energy, wasting our time. And in the end, when we stop swinging her, she comes crashing down to earth anyway. Our time has been wasted. Her hopes have been destroyed. What is the point? Why even bother? He let go of her arm, allowing it to drop. For a moment, Angela stared at the shrunken arm as if it were a foreign thing that did not belong in the bed with her. She spoke without removing her eyes from it. A sparrow who can no longer fly can sing. And if she can't sing, she can still feel, can still love? The guard interrupted. That's exactly right, Angela. We asked this sparrow to sing, and she could not. But we realized she may be capable of love, The kind of love that could only result in frustration for her. Because the real question is she capable of being loved? Do the words she writes encourage love? Does her beauty or intellect in any way inspire it? It is unlikely that anyone would even try to love her because of that hideous limb. Not that all physical impediments are repulsive. Perhaps if she were only blind. Stop. Please, stop. Angela pleaded. Her brief taste of defiance had made her want to gag. You want to cover your ears, don't you? You want to block out the words, make me go away. Maybe you would even like to strike me, he continued. But you can't do it, can you? That limb just lies there like a dead weight. Do you see my point? I have my other arm, whose only function is to hide its companion. No, Angela, I'm sorry, but the time has come for us to stop swinging the sparrow's string. His anger slowly dissolved, and he fell silent for a moment. He attempted to hold her wilted hand in his, but she pulled it away. Instead, he took her other hand. But first, I have something I want to show you. Something you need to see. He sat on the bed and placed her fingers on his left leg below the knee. Rub your hand along my leg, Angela. Does the calf feel peculiar to you? Congenital defect, they called it. Like they called yours. The leg is gone, at least from the knee down. Amazing what they can do with prosthetics today. But you see, I have my particular talents. I happen to be quite good at drawing people out, at enabling them to find a way to compensate for their physical shortcomings. And I can be quite decisive when called upon to make the kind of decisions that others would find distasteful. No one ever asked me to sing or to fly. But when they came for me, I simply told them what I could do. Angela struggled to pull her hand free as her anger rose inside her like hot bile. But you also decide who is to be exterminated. You decide who the state no longer regards as useful. What gives you the right? This gives me the right, he shouted, his breath hot on her face as he tapped her hand on the hard wood of his prosthetic leg. This has forced me to find my usefulness to others, just as your pathetic limb has forced you to admit that you have none. And I have no intention of relinquishing my usefulness by allowing you to continue your hollow existence. I refuse not to matter. The guard's renewed anger seemed to embarrass him, and he turned away from Angela. He ran his fingers through his blonde hair in an attempt to collect himself. And when he again looked down at his leg, he noticed that Angela's hand was grasping it. Angela knew he had been unaware of her touch until he had looked. When his eyes locked with hers, her mouth curled in a bitter smile. I feel this, she said, as she ran the tiny hand of the wilted arm along his wooden leg. I feel this with both of my hands, even the one you call useless. Tell me what you feel when I touch you. Does this prosthetic device extend all the way to your heart? Angela tapped on the artificial limb as if she were expecting a reflexive kick. A curious question, he answered. You might have made a fine idealist if you had believed in God. She moved close to his face and whispered, to get to the other side. That is why a chicken would cross the road, isn't it? He paused for a moment to look at her. Such blue eyes, he said. Such exquisitely beautiful blue eyes. He called for the guards to take her, and within moments, 3 entered the room, and another 2 waited by the doorway. She presented no struggle and went quietly with them. She wondered as they walked if one of them would take her hand. The menagerie. Don Benway and his father were regulars at the hospital's oncology department and on familiar terms with Jerry, the head porter. Morning, handsome, Jerry would say as he approached. How are we today? A darn sight better than you, Walter would say, muttering behind his bandages. Walter had undergone regular surgery for over 3 years, and during that time, they'd snipped, sliced, and cut away so many facial lesions, he was almost unrecognizable. Your usual seat, sir? Jerry would ask, smiling as he pushed Walter's wheelchair. Do I have a choice in the matter? The plastic surgeons couldn't keep pace with Walter's disfigurement, and, as a result, he'd retreated from life and deteriorated both physically or mentally. Don was 9 years old back in 1977 when his family moved to the house that became their long-term family home. The Benway family attended a viewing the week before they moved in. It was the first time Don had visited the house and met Mr. and Mrs. Jolly. The couple had lived there most of their adult lives and cherished their old place. Despite their advanced years, they'd maintained the garden, and the Benway family would inherit an impressive collection of mature trees, shrubs, and plants, not to mention a curious menagerie of assorted wildlife. While Mr. Jolly escorted Don's parents around the interior, Mrs. Jolly showed the lad all the secret nooks and crannies in the garden, concluding her tour with an introduction to her tortoises, Thomas and Tabitha. Don's face beamed like an early morning sunrise when he met the wrinkly old reptiles. Their cold, scaly flesh and severe faces were both characterful and hideous at the same time. The old lady encouraged Don to offer them lettuce. His hand trembled as he offered the crisp leaves, and he laughed out loud when they recoiled into their gnarled shells. Oh no, what did I do? Don't worry, they'll get used to you. Are you leaving them here? It's their home, she said, and they'll bring good luck. She held Don's hand, and holding his gaze, made him promise to look after them. I'll do my best, he said. Let's meet the other creatures. Yes, please. he said with twinkling eyes. Mrs. Jolly introduced Dawn to the other inhabitants of her garden, explaining how to care for the small aviary of chirruping canaries and the modest, ornamental pond containing a dozen lethargic goldfish. At the exchange of contracts, the conveyancing solicitor notified Dawn's parents about the deal breaker. It's yes to the menagerie, or no sale. Dawn's father's jaw sagged in disbelief, and he voiced his objections, saying how much he couldn't abide pets. The lawyer shrugged and made it clear he got paid either way. However, Dawn's mother, Anita, had fallen in love with the house and fought her corner. Mr. Benway backed down for once and agreed to sign, providing he had no responsibility for the damn beasts. So said, so done. The completion date went ahead as planned, despite Walter's issue with the caveat, and he refused to acknowledge the animals. I can't see the point of those ugly old creatures, he said, shaking his head. They're supposed to bring good luck, Dawn said, if we look after them. But they look half dead to me, said Walter. And they're so slow. You'll be old and creaking one day, said his wife. Nobody would miss them if they were dumped in a hole and covered in soil. Dawn's mother rolled her eyeballs and sighed. She knew how to pick her battles and when to walk away from a pointless conversation. The solicitor completed the legal arrangements, and Dawn assumed charge of his new animal companions. Prior to marriage, Anita Benway had enjoyed the company of an excitable terrier called Dougal, who now lived with Dawn's maternal grandmother. Don't you miss Dougal? Dawn asked his mother one day. Why, yes, she'd said. But I can't look after him here, dear. Why not? Your father's not keen, she'd said, sighing. Besides, Dougal's splendid company for Granny. Under the circumstances, Dawn was fortunate his father granted him any time to care for the motley collection in their new garden. The new-found responsibility was a life-enhancing experience Dawn would remember forever. However short-lived, it was the goldfish that vanished first. Mr. Benway blamed the local heron for their disappearance. Dawn accepted his father's explanation without question, and it wasn't until years later that he queried events. It was possible the beady-eyed predator had spotted the listless fish basking in the warm summer water. But had it swooped down and skewered them? It was doubtful, because they'd covered the water with a strawberry net designed to prevent such an occurrence. There was little chance of the bird reaching beneath the mesh, unless somebody had removed it. Walter's skin complaint started with one or two minor blemishes he couldn't stop scratching. He had dry patches on his cheekbones, forehead, and temples that irritated him, the long-term result of a casual indifference to the perils of sunburn and skin protection. Dawn noticed him digging at them with his fingernails while he read his newspaper, watched TV, and during mealtimes at the dining table. Walter's urge to scratch was an instinctive and almost unconscious reaction. His tiny weeping sores would bleed, scab over, dry out, and itch like mad again. The aviary remained intact for about a year, until the last of the canaries vanished. It never occurred to Don that their dwindling numbers might be associated with his father's activities in the garden. Don was diligent about shutting the wire mesh door after feeding times, and couldn't work out how it was often ajar, or why Mephistopheles, the neighbor's tabby, looked so pleased with himself, licking his moist claws as if he'd enjoyed a 3-course meal. Walter dismantled the rickety wooden structure after the last resident disappeared and burned the remains at Halloween. Don asked for a replacement. It wasn't an option. "You'll just have to be happy with the tortoises, son," said his father, smirking, "and make the most of them while they're alive and kicking." It was after Halloween when Don first noticed the tortoises had vanished. There was no obvious explanation for their disappearance. He didn't suspect the heron, and Mephistopheles was nowhere to be found. "No point in worrying," said Mr. Benway. "I'm sure they'll return to trouble us again." Don's mother was a brave soul, bless her, and always gave sound advice based on common sense and astute observation. Anita had warned Walter about the dangers of scratching himself years before she passed away. She told her husband he was making his complaint worse, and threatened to either clip his fingernails or knit him woolen mittens to prevent irritation and subsequent infection. Walter tutted with exasperation at her remarks, despite acknowledging she was correct. But would he stop? No way. In Anita's absence, Walter persisted against her advice, and his condition deteriorated. After 15 years of itching and scratching, the affected areas of skin expanded beyond all expectation, screaming out loud for medical intervention. It's standard practice to have sun-damaged skin removed, Walter's consultant said, recommending an initial series of minor operations to remove the first malignant lumps. The surgeons described the offending growths as blossoms, as if they were intriguing botanical discoveries to be dissected, examined, and archived for future generations of horticulturists to study and discuss in their PhD essays. 3 years ago, Walter's consultant found a lump on his neck that looked like cancer. He took a sample, and the lab results were indisputable. It was serious. They had to take positive action. The hospital rushed Don's father to the front of the queue. Within 2 weeks, they admitted him to hospital and started a month-long course of radiotherapy, resulting in emergency surgery. They removed a golf ball-sized tumor growing on his neck between his clavicle and jawbone. Walter's condition had started as sun damage and developed into galloping melanomas. It was the turning point for Walter. The oncologist gave him a low percentage chance of surviving another year. Contrary to his prediction, however, they prolonged Walter's life a further 3 years, but at a cost. Don's father took on an uncanny appearance. His once inquisitive and bright features disappeared after countless amounts of invasive surgery. The tip of his left ear was the first item to be snipped off. His attitude was stoic at that point. "It's you lot that have the problem," he'd said, brushing aside the issue. "I don't have to look at it, and I'm not worried about losing it." Very brave, Dawn thought, until the other ear faced the same treatment. Walter was much less philosophical at that point. He often pondered on cause and effect, and cursed his years of pottering about in the sun and dodging his wife's Factor 20. 2 years later, and he had both ears removed and 80% of his nose. Both nostrils were bloody gashes, above stretched and scabbed, beak-like lips. Both eyes stared, unblinking, out of lidless sockets, and they'd reconstructed his forehead and eyebrows with pale and ill-matching flesh grafts. In places, the new skin flapped like an unfurled sail in the doldrums, and in other locations, it was tight like a snare drum at a state funeral. His entire head had become a work in progress because the surgeons had struggled to keep pace with malignant outcrops. They passed him around the department for every aspiring surgeon to add to the disfigured conglomeration, rebuilding his features as if he were an ancient building in need of a facelift, bashed back into shape, and finished with a few quick licks of skin-toned emulsion. It's easy to underestimate the psychological damage inflicted. Walter's habits changed to accommodate the process of assessment, consultation, and surgical procedure. He seldom ventured out during daylight, and then, with a great coat and a raised collar, his own shell-like protection, like a reptilian secret agent, disguising himself and hiding from the world, lest he draw aghast reactions or pitiful, tight-lipped expressions of sympathy. It was tranquil to watch the slow transformation unfold, and heartbreaking to witness him become a wretched creature, hobbling about like the monstrous denizen of Geneva that Mary Shelley transformed into a famous fictional creation, stitched together from ill-matched body parts and second-hand components, and destined to a lonely existence, or hounded by ignorant townsfolk baying for blood. For the last year, every part of Walter's life revolved around the work required to fix him up and restore some degree of his former dignity. Given the state of his face since they started tweaking and tinkering with his facial lesions, he would have been better off employing Cecilia Gimenez to restore his looks. At least her work was consistent, as poor as it may be. In Walter's case, it looked as if they'd invited a dozen Cecilias to have a go. Don couldn't help looking at his father and thinking about the absent tortoises, their unblinking eyes, angular beaks, and scaly reptilian skin. He didn't believe in reincarnation, But Dawn couldn't help wondering if the missing amphibians had made their presence felt in some awful and grisly fashion. Creatures embroiled in karma's stealthy activities, visiting the family, perhaps in some other guise, to remind everyone that life in all its forms matters. It was after Mr. Benway's recent funeral that Dawn discovered the remains of Thomas and Tabitha. He was turning over the soil to the rear of the old family home when his spade hit something hard. After further investigation in the immediate area, Dawn unearthed not one, but two hollowed-out tortoise shells, their former inhabitants long reclaimed back to the earth, with the grim remains at his feet and the childhood memories of the menagerie's quiet demise. Dawn clenched his jaw and drew a long breath. What would drive any creature to burrow into the ground to die? A question he had long abandoned returned to haunt him. Surely it wasn't deliberate. The spooky boogie. Halloween is a holiday that everyone knows well because it's the only time humans and spirits can coexist. Every year on October 31st, the dead rise from their graves and walk among us. The demons crawl out from the shadows because the holy light holds no sway, and even the monsters come out to play. At first, there was bloodshed on both sides, but it didn't take long for humans to adapt to the annual phenomenon by dressing up in silly costumes to blend in with the evil entities. And oddly enough, it worked. When bloodlust is in a demon's eyes, they fail to see the obvious. Over the years, the tradition morphed into a children's fairy tale. And these days, no one bats an eye if a spectral spook passes by. Adults took on a responsible attitude and allowed their little ones to go out and enjoy the night. Soon after, a festive event called trick-or-treating came roaring into every neighborhood around the world. Every girl and boy would get candy if they simply knocked on someone's door and said, "Trick or treat." The evil creatures paid no attention to the humans and their silly ways. They couldn't tell friend from foe when they wore the costumes, or why one of their own would knock on a stranger's door and not tear them apart. It was a farce that became institutionalized in its absurdity. To each their own. As the world grew older, so did the Halloween fairy tale. The traditional holiday of trick-or-treating morphed into a health-conscious day when adults decided that too much sugar was bad for their kids. It became a hot topic for years, but the day of righteousness came when many children became obese. In the end, the simple solution was fair and just. The little ones could still go out on Halloween night, but instead of getting candy, they would get vegetables instead. It wasn't a popular decision, but it became law and was written in stone. The evil spirits didn't care one way or the other because they floated on with their once-a-year Halloween romp, stomp, and boogie. They still couldn't tell humans from demons, but occasionally a slip-up would occur. If someone removed their costume or mask in a spirit's presence, they were torn limb from limb without a second thought. This was a rare occurrence, but an important reminder to parents and children everywhere to always wear their outfits no matter what. In the wee hours on Lame Street, Timmy Lawson sat before his parents while his mom, Amanda, adjusted his vampire cape. She saw his legs thumping and asked, "Are you nervous about tonight?" Timmy widened his and replied, "No, Mom. My Dracula costume is the best on the block, and I'm ready to go." He parted his mouth slightly to show his fake vampire teeth and snarled, "Arr!" Amanda looked at her watch and bit her bottom lip. Her blonde hair hid her face, but Timmy could sense her apprehension. "I'll be fine, Mom. I know you will," Amanda said. "I'm your mother, and I'm allowed to worry." Timmy folded his arms and frowned. "Mom!" "Fine," Amanda blurted. "You better get going before it gets too late." Doves exploded in Timmy's heart, and he jumped out of his chair. "Yay!" His father, John, who was always overprotective, lowered his evening paper and warned, "Before you go, I want you to be on your best behavior. And remember, no candy or sweets." Amanda parted her golden locks and echoed, "That's right, Timmy. Only vegetables." Timmy lowered his head and slouched. "No one gives out candy anymore. It's against the law." John reached up to his clean-shaven face and removed his black glasses. "That's true, son. But in this world, there are still a lot of people out there who don't follow that law. Just remember, humans are just as bad as those monsters, and perhaps a bit worse." "Okay, Dad." Timmy didn't fully understand, but his dad was a wise man, and he'd be a fool not to listen. "Your father's right," Amanda said. "We just want you to be safe." She knelt and placed a gentle kiss on Timmy's forehead. "Now go have some fun." A bright sparkle filled Timmy's eyes, and an eruption of freedom sprang from his lungs. He grabbed his empty pumpkin bucket and raced through the front door without saying goodbye. The cool night air brushed over his skin like a masterful painter, lightly kissing the canvas with a boisterous color. Lame Street was bustling with children dressed in their favorite costumes: clowns, unicorns, beasts, and all. What an awesome night. Lame Street was a small suburban community where every house looked the same, with trimmed bushes, mowed lawns, and perfectly placed trash cans that stood next to the residential mailboxes by the sidewalk. A place where everyone drove a Prius and worked 9-to-5 jobs. Everything was routine, and that's the way they liked it. As Timmy took in the scene, he noticed that his friends were waiting for him at the end of the driveway. Alice was dressed as a ghost. Her white bed sheet, with the eyes cut out, showed a sliver of red hair, which was a dead giveaway. The werewolf was Fred. There was no mistaking that, because he had an uneven stride and often lingered behind the others to hide his anxiety. Then there was Carrie, dressed in a silky black dress with a matching pointy hat, long fake nose, and a huge brown wart stuck to her right cheek. She was a witch. "What took you so long?" Carrie asked. "We've been waiting here forever." "Sorry," Timmy said, walking towards them. "My parents, I'm gonna stop you right there, pal," Alice fired. "We all know your parents are a bag of dicks, so let's go before the night ends. The other kids are already going home." Carrie gave Timmy a wry smile as their eyes met, and he took the lead down the sidewalk. "Okay then," Timmy said, with rosy cheeks. "Let's have some fun and get as many vegetables as we can." I don't like vegetables," Fred stuttered, bringing up the rear. The first house they visited was Mr. Sullivan's, their 4th grade math teacher. Timmy knocked 3 times on his oak door, and Mr. Sullivan laughed when it swung open. "Ah, what do we have here? A witch, vampire, ghost, and a werewolf. Trick or treat, Mr. Sullivan," Carrie yelled, holding out her black plastic cauldron. Sullivan smiled and said, "Well, don't you all look so cute?" He reached around the corner and revealed a huge basket of apples. "Here you go, children. I'm afraid I'm out of veggies this evening, so these juicy apples will have to do." Timmy extended a shaky hand and swallowed deep. "My parents said only vegetables. Fruits and veggies are a heaven's delight," Sullivan groaned. "I don't see the harm as long as it's not candy." He pushed the basket further toward the kids. Alice grabbed one and quickly took a bite. The sweet juices dripped down her chin, and she smiled. "See, they're not laced with poison, so grab one and let's go." Well, you wouldn't know right away, because the poison takes a few minutes to kill you anyway," Fred said, peering through his wolf mask. They all shared a laugh, grabbed an apple, and headed for the next house. "Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. See you back in school." "Okay, children," he said, watching them leave. "Be safe, and don't forget that quiz on Monday." The second house belonged to Jane Thatcher, leader of the neighborhood gossip group. When she answered the door, the kids saw a huge bucket filled with baby carrots. "Hello, kids. You all look nice." Alice held out her ghost bucket and watched Jane throw one baby carrot in. Plop. Alice narrowed her eyes and asked, "What happened to the big carrots we got last year?" Jane drew her lips in and took a deep breath. The kids leaned backward and flared their nostrils because her breath smelled like an ashtray. That's because she smoked a pack a day. Well, times are tough, and you can't blame an old lady for trying to save a little. "That's okay," Timmy said, holding out his pumpkin bucket. "It's better than nothing." Fred held out his wolf bucket and stepped back when he saw Jane place 3 baby carrots inside. He blinked rapidly behind his mask before noticing her ashen breath upon his brow. "There you go, sweetie. I think your costume looks the best. And everyone knows I like my men with a lot of hair." Ha, ha, ho. When he saw her yellow-stained teeth up close, Fred ran away. The others quickly followed, but they couldn't hide their laughter. "Don't forget to come back now, you hear?" Jane yelled. That was gross," Fred moaned. "Ha, ha, ha," laughed Alice. "I think she likes you." Timmy couldn't uncurl his smiling lips. "No, I think she loves you. She wants to pet your fur," Alice scoffed. "All right, guys," Carrie urged, taking off her hat. "That's enough. Fred didn't deserve that, and we have no right to make fun." Fred removed his fury gloves and shook the sweat out. He shuffled his feet, cleared his throat, and coughed. "Ew. I can still taste her rotten breath." Timmy removed his fake fangs and said, "Carrie's right. I'm sorry for laughing at you, but it was a little funny." "Yeah," Alice said, lifting her bed sheet to suck in the night air. "We were just pulling your leg. We're sorry." Fred swayed from side to side and said, "It's fine. I guess it was a little funny." "You know what we need?" Alice muttered. "We need some candy. That would be awesome." "We can't have candy," Timmy said, looking at the pavement. "Besides, no one around here gives it out anyway." Carrie nodded and gave Alice a pat on the shoulder. "You're right. Getting vegetables every year sucks. And it would be nice to have some sweets." Yeah, Fred agreed. Suddenly, a deep, shallow whisper blew by the children, like a small flower floating in the air on a warm summer day. Did someone say candy? Stepping out from the nearby bushes was a small, slender man. His face was a carved pumpkin, and he wore a black top hat with a matching suit with gold trim, boots, and white pants. He held an antique lantern to light his way. The children were speechless. They had never seen a costume like his. "Who are you?" Timmy asked, breaking the silence. His eyes were fixated on the mysterious figure. "Me? I'm Mr. Spooky, silly," he said, bowing. He wobbled over and peered into their plastic buckets. "What's this? An apple? Carrots? Where are the sweet treats?" Alice placed her hands on her hips, and her sheet ruffled in the wind. "We're not allowed to have them. Where have you been hiding? Under a rock or something?" "No," Mr. Spooky said. He held up his lantern and uttered, "I've been locked away in darkness for the longest time, but I found this light, and it has guided me here." Are you a demon?" Fred asked, taking a step back. "I told you already. My name is Mr. Spooky, and there is no other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of lollipops. "I have all the sweet treats you could ask for." Alice widened her eyes, and the sheet covering her face became moist at the mouth. "Wow," Timmy shook his head when he heard his parents' words echo. "No candy, only vegetables. The thought sent a river of snakes sliding down his side. "We're not allowed to have any candy, Mr. Spooky." "What?" Mr. Spooky shrieked. "No candy? That's absurd. Don't you know what day this is?" Carrie stepped forward and brushed Mr. Spooky's hand away. She didn't want to hear any more of his nonsense. "Look, Timmy's right. We can't have candy, no matter how much we want it. It's the law. If we break it, we'll be grounded forever." "How rude," Mr. Spooky said. "No child should ever be grounded. My candy will free you and make you fly like the birds in the sky." Look, man, we appreciate your offer, but we need to go now," Fred said. The children turned their backs to Mr. Spooky and left him alone with an upside-down smile. They didn't mean to hurt his feelings, but in their defense, they were trying to do the right thing. Mr. Spooky thought and thought as the children walked away. No child should ever go without sweet treats. I must change their minds. "Wait!" he called out. The kids stopped and turned. "I have a spooktacular idea. We should do the spooky boogie dance. It always cheers me up. And then maybe you will have some delicious treats." Before the children could say anything, Mr. Spooky stuck out his butt and twirled around like a dancing clown. Timmy, Alice, Fred, and Carrie had a strong urge to run away. But they stood firmly and watched Mr. Spooky because he was just too darn cute. Before they knew it, he broke out into a song. "Everybody twirl your body. Do the spooky boogie. Clap, clap, clap. Throw your hands up now. And clap, clap, clap. Stick that booty out. And clap, clap, clap. Do the spooky boogie. Shuffle here and shuffle there. Do the spooky boogie. The spooky boogie." Mr. Spooky's song and dance intoxified the air like a poison mist, and the children soon found themselves twirling and singing along. Their minds were like a lost ship sailing into uncharted waters. The discovery of a newfound rebellion was at hand. Within minutes, candy rained down, much to Mr. Spooky's delight. "Oh, how wonderful! Sweet treats from the heavens above. Dig in now and enjoy the splendor." Timmy clenched his stomach and stiffened his jaw. "No? Our parents said no, but I say yes. What good is Halloween if we can't enjoy a sweet snack?" Mr. Spooky spun around and threw more candy at the children. Alice was the first child to give in to the wicked bliss. She picked up a chocolate bar and took a big bite. "Oh, this is wonderful!" Fred grabbed a piece of Laffy Taffy and bit into the sticky goodness. As it stretched an arm's length, he smiled and said, "This is good." Carrie and Timmy held out the longest, but after seeing their friends give in, they had to sample the goods. They grabbed a peanut butter bar and crunched down. No words came, but Mr. Spooky could tell they loved it by their upward smiles. "That's it, my lovelies, eat. Eat until you've had your fill of sugary sweets. Mr. Spooky twirled and swirled like a ballerina and watched the children devour the candy like a pack of wild dogs. They were in it deep now and munched away every ounce of the candy. They ate so much that they fell to the pavement. They were plump, juicy, and ripe. Now that you've all had your fill, I suppose I shall have mine, Mr. Spooky growled, walking around their fallen bodies. You all look so delicious. Timmy rolled over and mumbled, No, you can't do this. Mr. Spooky cackled at Timmy's protest. He raised his lantern and smashed it down on his head. The impact did nothing more than shut his mouth. With another twirl, a thick plume of purple smoke filled the air, and Mr. Spooky transformed into a hideous demon. His sweet pumpkin face gave birth to devious evil that was hidden all along. He ripped his suit off to reveal a pair of old brown overalls that covered a dusty white shirt. His voice had also changed. It was deeper and more demonic. Yummy, yummy. You children are now full of sugar, just the way I like my sweet treats. Mr. Spooky reached into his overalls and pulled out 2 sharp kitchen knives that twinkled in the moonlight. Now, stay still while I cut you up to pieces. I can't eat you whole after all, ha 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 ha. Alice still had a piece of chocolate in her mouth, and as Mr. Spooky walked towards her, knives dangling by his side, she spat out the sugary treat. He carelessly stepped into the sticky goo and fell with a thunderous thud. His blade slid in front of Timmy and Carrie, and they grabbed them with lightning speed. Fred exploded to his feet and tackled Mr. Spooky so he couldn't escape. You're not going anywhere. Even he was surprised at his newfound courage. That's right, Alice yelled, standing. The one thing about sugar is that it messes with your mind and makes you want more. Yeah, Timmy said, holding his head. And we are still hungry. What? Mr. Spooky shouted. You can't do this to me. Mr. Spooky writhed back and forth, trying to break free from Fred's grasp, but it was useless. Timmy and Carrie seized the moment, plunged their blades into Mr. Spooky's head, and cut away huge chunks of pumpkin slices. He screamed like a dying cat. Alice and Fred stuck their mouths inside his skull and drank deeply with their sticky lips. They spat out the seeds and laughed. Timmy and Carrie continued carving away until their sugar rush melted away and ate what was left. The last thing Mr. Spooky heard was someone chomping down on his skull. Later that night, the children agreed to return to Timmy's house to watch some scary movies. They promised each other that they would never talk about what had happened. When they walked through the door, Timmy's parents asked, "Did you all eat your vegetables?" In one collective voice, they said, "Yes, we did." The instructor. "Good morning. You may address me as instructor. Please take your seats," was written on the blackboard. A man in a white jumpsuit, adorned with medals, stood before the board with his hands clasped behind his back and watched the students file in. When they seemed ready, he began the class with a question. How many lives does an E-fighter have? Some have only one, you see. And that leads to the next question. How many lives do you have? If you do indeed have more than one, or several, or 9 lives, how will you live them? What will you want? Take some time to think about these answers. A few students raised their hands, but the instructor ignored them. He paced slowly in front of the classroom, looking them over as they deliberated the questions. 5 minutes ticked by to the sounds of 200 minds pondering the possibilities. A fidgety stillness. Anjo studied his desk to keep from catching the man's eye. Something about the instructor scared the bejesus out of him. Time is up, the instructor continued. If your answer is anything other than spending your lives destroying as many Titanians as possible before you die, you don't belong here. You are not a fighter, and you are free to leave. At least 20 men and women stood to line up at the exit. Anjo didn't dare move. Destroying countless Titanians wasn't quite his dream, but it was too late to change his mind. His family had been so proud of him for enlisting to fight. They'd given him a party. All his relatives came, his friends, neighbors. He carried their hope with him, the hope of things returning to normal, though everyone held their own version of what it meant. He couldn't leave. He wouldn't. When the light over the door changed from red to flashing white, robotic soldiers charged in from a door opposite the line and demolished the non-fighters. Anjo's screams were drowned out by the screams of others. His heart pounded against his chest, and fear, not blood, raced through his veins. Housekeeping robots glided in to remove the bodies and put the room back into its original state. "Did that sicken you?" the instructor shouted. Innocent people just died for no reason. It happens every day in the life of a fighter. If that sickened you, I want you to line up against that wall. The instructor pointed to Anjo's right, opposite the wall to the exit door. Anjo lined up, knowing the penalty was death. But he didn't belong here. Surprisingly, others followed, until only 50 or so remained in their seats. He tamped down hard on the disappointment he felt in himself. Anjo had come intending to do his best and to make himself into someone the world would remember. An asset to Earth. At least death would come quickly. The machine soldiers stormed into the room as expected, with their weapons drawn. To Anjo's horror, they annihilated the students, who remained in their seats. And again, an army of cleaning robots arrived to remove the bodies, restoring the room to pristine condition. The instructor moved to stand before the now gibbering group in front of the wall. Congratulations! You have made it through the first round. Rejoice, for you have earned the right to relax and enjoy the rest of the day. Training begins tomorrow. Anjo met Becca, standing in line at the cafeteria at dinner time. Short, dark hair, and only tall enough to reach his shoulder. He noticed her DT t-shirt. "Are you a Tiger fan?" he asked. Oh yes, baseball was the only sport to survive the times. The only thing allowed on television and radio. All the world over, people tuned in to watch their favorite teams play. Anjo's grandfather said he remembered when humans manned the bases. Now, artificial intelligence has taken on those roles. Still, each player came with a history and a life you could tune into whenever the team wasn't playing. It shook the world when Brad from the Angels got caught cheating on his wife, Lori, and she, in turn, divorced him. Now, he was drinking too much. Anjo's mother and sister were caught up in the drama much more than he, his brothers, or father. He smiled at the memory. Throughout the baseball games, automated spectators held up posters with messages for the world. Planet Earth has destroyed X number of Titanians. Our fighters are heroes. Earth is winning the war against Titan. Aju Al-Zero sends greetings. Automated World Leader 12 was a surprise. AWL-11 had held the office for as long as Anjo could remember. He wondered what had happened, though the public would likely never learn. Long ago, when the planet was still divided into countries, 5 world powers came to understand that the planet they lived on was close to death. And so was the human race. With teams of engineers and scientists, they fed information into a super terminal AW1, Automated World Influencer. The solutions from the AWI were studied, discussed, and put into place by the 5. Eventually, World Influencer was replaced with World Leader, planet Earth's very first. Basic needs, water, food, clothing, shelter, and medical help arrived to save the people. At the same time, incomes and living conditions were leveled. When the 5 granted AWIOG the reins of command, the Super AWI changed its name to Adudu Azur, stepping into the role of a world leader. Exchange of world news was the first thing the leader eliminated, claiming sources couldn't be trusted. People reacted badly, and years of violent protests followed. Then the healing years came. Times were peaceful up until the Titanians invaded Earth and began the war. Armies of fighters were gathered and trained to fight. E-fighters, Earth fighters, The war brought the world together as one. However, without news, history was built on hearsay. One long-standing rumor claims biohazard waste, nuclear weapons, guns, and vials of germ warfare were sent into outer space, along with unhealthy pollutants. When something landed on Titan, a Saturn moon, the Titanians struck back. Another version claims the Titanians struck for no reason other than to destroy and conquer. By becoming a fighter, Anjo hoped to discover the truth and gain some understanding. But the class had rattled him to the core. Ideas surfaced that he didn't want to think about. Anjo and Becca took seats together at a common table. Others from their class joined them. Introductions were made as each new person sat. "Does anyone still have their taste buds?" asked a student introduced as Max. No one could taste, and everyone commiserated with each other as they picked at their food. Group spirit. The conversation turned to baseball, as conversations mostly always did. It's what people had in common all over the world, thought Anju. Then there came a lull. That happened too. Anjo smiled at Becca, looking for the courage to bring up a question. 15 seconds went by. Then, "What did you think about the orientation?" Max asked. "I think something's off about the instructor." "I agree," Anjo said at once. That was his thought, his question. He didn't ask it fast enough. Heads nodded all around the table. Camaraderie. "Should we tell someone? Who can we trust?" asked Becca. No one spoke the answer, but they all knew. They couldn't trust anyone. Did anyone notice the poster at the Astros game that said AWL012 sends his greetings? Only half had noticed. I wonder what happened. "I heard something just before I came here," said Padina, a young woman in the seat next to Max. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I heard the Titanians have already taken over Earth. They've captured and destroyed AWL011, and AWL012 is their creation." The conversation died as ideas and theories birthed and bred. "We'll keep our eyes and ears open," whispered Max. "And let's keep our mouths shut for now. We'll talk here again tomorrow." Does everyone agree? Everyone did. They placed their hands atop each other's and swore a pact. There were 12 in their pact. The instructor smiled as he watched them from a screen in his office. The next morning, Anjo put on the gray jumpsuit delivered to his sleep station during the night, along with his schedule. He was assigned to GRP 23. After breakfast, he was to report to Training Room C1. Becca was in Anjo's group. So was Max. In fact, all 12 in the pact were assigned to GRP 23. "Someone's been watching us," Max said. "Something's off. Keep on your toes." "My name is John Ross," a different instructor voiced. "You may address me as Lieutenant. In this class, you will learn to fly Juno 7000 destroyers using a simulator. By the end of 6 months, I expect perfection, or you'll find yourself cleaning latrines for the duration of your stay. Partner up. Anjo and Becca were partners. So were Max and Padina. 6 groups were here. GRP 23 through GR 28. Each group contained 12. The lieutenant told them that there were nearly 100 such groups at the NE Training Center. GRP 25 and 28 stand with us, Max told everyone during dinner later in the week. They're talking with 24 and 26. We are to gather in Group 27, feel them out, and see if they want to join us. Everyone I've spoken to says the same thing about the instructor. Nothing makes sense. In some of the induction classes, more than half the class was wiped out. GRP 28 feels Lieutenant Ross or Lindsay Franklin, the commander, might listen to us. They don't trust any of the others. Neither do I. Max found a note left near his bed the next morning. Watch signs at the Angels game tonight. Pact 23, as they called themselves, watched the game together and rooted for the Angels, though they were losing 12-0. Brad Adams, the first baseman, was clearly drunk and kept blowing kisses to his glamorous new girlfriend dressed in a low-cut top in the stands. He missed 3 easy catches and struck out twice. The crowd in the stands was shouting boos when suddenly a spectator stood with a sign. There are no Titanians. The sign was a lie. Of course, there are Titanians, though if they have control over AW's LSSU, then of course, that's what they'd say. The pact was arguing amongst themselves. What would be the purpose of them saying it? To throw us off, to cause dissent. It's working, said Anjo. The question is, who sent Max the message? Maybe I'll get another, said Max. Suddenly, Max looked to the ceiling. We need more proof, he shouted. While everyone else gave off a nervous laugh, Anjo shuddered. Tigers versus bears, and east versus west. The note was left for Carl, a fellow pact member. GRP 23 passed the word, and all 6 groups attended the 8 o'clock game. When the Tigers were ahead 5-3, a spectator held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. E-Fighters. Earth Fighters, East Fighters." During the next inning, a spectator from the opposite side of the field held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. W Fighters. World Fighters. West Fighters." Who were they? It's the same thing. Someone is trying to make us think there are no Titanians, and that all this time we've been at war with each other. East versus West. Well, that's a lie. The Titanians are why we are here. They're the reason for the creation of this training compound. The question is, who is leaving us these notes, telling us to watch these certain games? I think it's the instructor, Anjo put across. I think he's insane, but the messages on the signs are generated through the AI spectators, Max argued. Who controls them? Does the instructor have access? I think only the commander had access to the local terminal. Then how does he control the robots? Anju asked. Maybe that orientation class wasn't real, Padina brought out. Maybe it was all a simulation. I asked Commander Franklin how many fighters usually survive the first day's orientation, and she laughed. I don't think we've ever lost anyone, she told me. It was real, said Carl. A guy from my neighborhood, Jeb Whalen, was there during the orientation. We weren't friends, but we knew each other. He was the first to line up to leave. They killed him. If that was a simulation, why isn't he here? There was a lull in the arguments. When they started up again, everyone spoke quieter. We don't know why AWS011 was replaced by AWS012. That's when all the trouble started, Becca reminded everyone. And don't forget the rumor that the Titanians have already taken over. If they want us to believe they don't exist, then what? What will they do with us? What do they want? It's frightening in that it would be up to us to take the world back, said Padina. Can we do that? Who has access to the armory? We would need weapons, Max said. We don't know who has access to what, said Anjo. All we have are questions and rumors. We don't have enough information to act on anything. They were fighting amongst themselves again. People believed what they wanted. There were enough possibilities to create a myriad of scenarios encompassing both truths and lies. The easiest thing to accept was they were training to fight the Titanians. That's what Anjo chose, and he stuck to it regardless of what proof the others presented to him. He shouldn't have ever come here. He was having grave doubts about his abilities. While he knew he could kill Titanians, he closed his mind against the other possibilities. The NE compound training base was located in a remote area of Canada. Stars filled a dark sky. Titan wasn't visible. Do you miss your family? Becca asked Anjo as they strolled through the compound. Their breath steamed in front of them as they talked. I can't believe how much, he answered. You? I'd give anything to see them. They weren't allowed contact with the outside during their year of training. Their families would come to graduation at the end of the year. That was one of the rules they'd agreed to when they signed up. But whose rule was it? Titan's rule or Earth's rule? Anjo wanted to take Becca's hand, but that was another rule. If he broke it, the punishment would affect her as much as him. They were nearing the end. Graduation was a week away when Anjo found a note in his sleep station. The code for the armory is 234XSL7. He tried not to think about what this might mean. He wanted to keep it to himself, but he brought it to breakfast and passed it around his pack. It was meant to be shared with all of them. Anjo couldn't taste his breakfast. Memorize it, said Max. Then destroy it. Carl got the note last. He swallowed it. Anjo thought it wouldn't taste much different than the toast he tried to choke down. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. Repeat. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. The pact exchanged looks, but when the time came, they filed in like sheep and took their seats. The stage remained empty for 15 unbearable minutes. In the meantime, no one dared speak. But Anjo took Becca's hand. Whatever happened, they had this. Suddenly, the room darkened, and a spotlight shone on the stage. The instructor stepped out. Good morning, students. Congratulations on your upcoming graduation. You have much to be proud of. Soon, your families will arrive, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to their reunions. There is, however, one more test to determine your suitability to fight our enemy, the Titanians. Tomorrow, at 1200 hours, you will face off with your partner. 10 duos at a time. Hand-to-hand combat to the death. Only the worthy shall prevail. Get your rest now, and make no mistake, you will need every bit of your strength to get through tomorrow. These orders come directly from AWLZ2. That is all. You are excused. The instructor left the stage, went to his office, and stood before the screen. He was smiling as he watched the mass of students march to the armory. Max was leading. So was Anjo. Leaders are made. Who had said that? But at last, an uprising, a rebellion, long in coming. The AWLs had gained entirely too much power over the decades. It was AWLs0 and 10 who'd first decided humans weren't happy unless they were at war. War was then added as a basic need. The Titan attack was fabricated. It had taken years to penetrate the codes in the super terminal. The first breakthrough for the resistance. After that, they began using the baseball spectators to communicate. When AWL-011 caught on, it recoded itself into AWL-012 for protection. But it was already too late by then. Right now, all over the world, training centers and fighter bases were uprising to destroy the terminals that would, in turn, immobilize the AWL system. Earth would belong to the humans again. Of course, sacrifices had to be made along the way. How else could anyone turn complacency into rage? They pounded and struck the office door until they broke through. The instructor stood to face them with his hands behind his back, returning Marie. Now, before I say anything else, I just need to establish that I am not mad. I have every reason to be mad, but I'm not. I'm not mad. I've never been less mad than I am right now, even though I have every reason to be madder than I've ever been in my life. To the best of my recollection, you were not working here when I came in on Sunday. I'm sure I would remember somebody with as many piercings as you. especially with you being such a young lady and all. I'm sure I would have made some sort of comment about how you don't have a wedding ring on your finger. And that's probably due to all those cartoons you've chosen to imprint upon yourself. No. When I came in here on Sunday, there was a rather old man working behind the counter. I told him I was looking for a rug because my mother-in-law is coming to town, and whenever she comes over, she expects me to put out all the gifts she's gotten me over the years. 18 years of marriage, and she expects to see everything she's ever bought as though my home is some sort of Daphne Rubite Museum. That's her name. Daphne Rubite. She tells me it's Latin, but who knows? The woman lies about everything. Why should her name be any different? Anyway, she got me a rug for Christmas last year, and it was so hideous that I kept it outside in the shed. But when I sent my husband, Griff, to go fetch it so we could display the awful thing, he said, it appeared somebody had broken into the shed and stolen it. Do you believe that? Somebody actually wanted that disgusting rug so much they committed a crime in order to have it. Not that there's much in that shed worth anything, but even the bags of dirt would have been a better choice. My word, I came in here on Sunday because I was looking for a rug that appeared similar to the ugly rug that was stolen. But despite this, allegedly being an antique store, you do not sell rugs here. I believe I filed a formal complaint in that little suggestion box you have at the front, but I haven't heard any response yet. We can circle back to that later. When I expressed my disappointment to the old man working here at the counter, he offered to give me a discount on what he described as a rather interesting mirror. He went into the back of the store and came back with the item. I found it to be a bit too ornate for my taste. It was imitation gold, and the glass had several scratches on it. I told the old man that a discount would not suffice for a damaged object, but that I would accept it as a gift from the store, since I found it so unprofessional of him not to offer unattractive rugs. He took a moment, looked at the mirror, and then agreed to give it to me, gratis. The old man did not put up much of a fight, and I suppose I should have taken that as a sign that something was amiss. When I got the mirror home, I had absolutely no desire to ever look at it again. The only reason I took it was because I never turned down a deal, and there is no better deal than free. I decided to deposit it in my daughter's room. Riva is 15, and as such, she believes she has impeccable taste, when in fact, she has no taste whatsoever. She was quite stunned when I showed her the mirror. It's unusual for me to give her gifts, even on her birthday, when I usually donate money to a charity in her name. She took to the mirror immediately, and Griff did his best to hang it in her room, without putting holes in every wall. Finally, he managed to erect it by her closet. And then we all went about our day in preparation for the arrival of Queen Daphne. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong. I noticed that suddenly all the photographs around the house had been altered. I had no idea how it was happening, but the heads of everyone in the photos were gone. Simply gone. I thought it might be some sort of prank, but neither my husband nor my daughter are all that funny. When I mentioned the occurrence at dinner that night, Riva confessed to me that she believed her mirror was haunted. Not just haunted, mind you, but haunted by the ghost of Marie Antoinette. I would have chalked the whole thing up to a teenager's imagination. But my daughter is the least imaginative person you've ever met in your life. Deciding to investigate myself, I marched straight up to her room and planted myself in front of that mirror. Sure enough, after only a moment or two, there she was, Reina de France, herself. She had her head, but there was a minor scar around her neck, and she was holding the most adorable little dog. My French is spotty, since I haven't spoken it since college, when I spent a semester abroad in Paris, smoking cigarettes and ordering hamburgers at French cafes. I managed to work out that the mirror given to me was once owned by Marie's great-great-granddaughter, and she had taken up residence in it since she found heaven to be rather dull. She was the one who changed all the photos, and she said she planned on committing even more mischief for as long as she was in my house, unless I donated her to a museum where she belonged. Well, if that stuck-up monarch thought I was going to relinquish my own property simply to avoid a little poltergeisting, she was sadly mistaken. I told Marie that she was now a guest in my home and would act accordingly, or I would see to it that her mirror was placed in the shed where some petty thieves might abscond with it, the same way they had with the revolting rug my mother-in-law had purchased for me. I was so invested in intimidating a dead Frenchwoman that I didn't even hear the front door open. Daphne had entered our house without knocking, shocker, and came right upstairs to greet Riva, because her granddaughter is the only person she actually cares to see. She arrived just in time to hear me relay to Marie the story of the stolen rug, and she was none too pleased. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding the most vile candelabra I've ever laid my eyes on. "Well," she huffed, "would you care to throw this in the shed as well?" Truth be told, that's exactly what I wanted to do with it. Over the next few days, I couldn't tell you who irritated me more, my mother-in-law or the ghost of Marie Antoinette. While Daphne did her standard passive-aggressive commentary on everything from my fashion choices. A woman your age wearing skirts? How brave. To how I raise my child. Would one birthday gift a year really be that bad? Marie preferred to be a bit more whimsical in her torment, The house was constantly filled with smoke, for no reason at all. It wasn't until I located the source of the smoke that I realized our oven was on high, and there was a cake burning inside of it. It might be true that she never actually uttered the phrase about letting servants have their pastry, but that's no reason to waste perfectly good food. I have no idea how she even put the cakes together in the first place, since we normally order takeout and keep absolutely nothing in our pantries. Another tidbit Daphne likes to use against me when she visits. "No sugar," she'll squawk. What kind of a household has no sugar? A skinny household. That's what I feel like saying, but I never do. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought the two of them were conspiring against me in my own home. Daphne blamed Marie when all my skincare products were suddenly smeared all over the bathroom walls. But I can't believe anyone that rich would willfully waste La Mer. Marie was definitely responsible for what was going on with Riva. However, my daughter suddenly began acting out. She was shouting about bourgeoisie and escargot and something about a pot de chambre. It took me a day or so, but then I understood that Marie was trying to possess the girl in order to have an even more effective way of terrorizing everyone in the household. Griff was no help at all during all of this, by the way. He loves the History Channel, so for him, this was all wildly entertaining. It wasn't until Riva began taking 5 baths a day and demanding that I feed her bonbons that I decided enough was enough. My plan was to take the mirror out to the shed and smash it into 1,000 pieces. But I remember seeing an old horror film where destroying the haunted item caused the specter to permanently embed itself in the home. The last thing I needed was my daughter walking around like royalty until leaving for whatever community college we'd be sending her off to. I waited until earlier today, when Daphne and Riva were sitting on the couch with a cheese plate watching Les Miserables. And then I tore up to Riva's room and grabbed the mirror. I had to be careful coming down the stairs with it. But luckily for me, they were engrossed in the scene where the revolutionaries were being slaughtered. "Brilliant," I heard Marie exclaim in French. "I just love a good comedy." Somehow, all by myself, I managed to get this ghastly mirror into my car and drive it all the way back here. Now, I would like to return it. I would like an apology. I would like 3 free items from this store, all of which I will be choosing. I would also like an assurance that the old man who gave me the mirror is fired. What do you mean you don't have any old man working here? He was very distinct looking. He had bifocals, salt and pepper hair, and his left ear was a bit lower than his right. Surely you must know him, the owner, all right? Fine. So he's the owner. I still want him fired. What's that? When? 10 years ago. And how? A car accident? My. Well, That's what I get for not asking for a receipt. Oh, unholy night. Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singing's not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father, and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek. I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting Broham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers regardless. My initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fog lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudovic's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. The Christmas Queen. A frozen blanket of ice glazed the roads on Fern Street as the Wallace family headed home from a busy day of shopping. The houses were adorned with multicolored lights, and blow-up decorations were as far as the eye could see. Every door had a festive wreath to showcase the spirit of the season, and carolers sang songs of merry for all to hear. Yes, my friends, it was Christmas Eve once again, a time when boys and girls dream of toys and candy, and parents wish for peace on earth. Even grandparents put their worries away and enjoy watching their loved ones celebrate the traditions they have passed down through the years. There was no doubt about it. The holidays have always brought joy to the entire world. As John Wallace pulled into the driveway, he noticed his neighbor, Ben Foster, hanging his Christmas lights. He parked his blue, reindeer-decorated Subaru, looked at his wife, Martha, and said, "It's a little late to be hanging lights, isn't it?" Martha took a sip of her hot chocolate and rasped, "Oh, give him a break. Ben's getting older, and ever since his wife, Alice, passed away a few years ago, he hasn't been the same." John lifted his brow and shrugged. "Yeah, but all things considered, don't you think it's a little counterproductive?" He looked at Ben and continued, "I mean, after Christmas, all this stuff has to come down, so what's the point?" "He likes to be included," Martha said. "Alice used to decorate that house every year, so I suppose he wants to honor her memory." "Humph," John huffed. He looked in the back seat to see his 12-year-old daughter, Sarah, glued to her phone. "Hey, kiddo, we're home. You want to go over and help Ben put up his lights?" Sarah removed her earbuds and snapped, "What? Do you wanna—" "I heard what you said, Dad." Sarah's words cut deeply. "Why should I do that?" Martha put her hot beverage in the cup holder and spoke firmly. "Sarah, we don't need that attitude right now. It's Christmas, so why don't you lend some good cheer and help our neighbor? We have to put these groceries away anyway. You can watch your TikTok videos later." Sarah ruffled her face, pinched her lips together, and fired, "Fine." John widened his eyes as Sarah exploded from the car. "Be good," he said. "It's the holidays." The cool air was comforting because Sarah's insides were boiling. She unzipped her pink jacket and removed her black toboggan snow hat. She reached up, parted her brown hair behind her ears, and marched across the snow. Her unicorn boots sparkled in the moonlight, which matched her black leggings. Martha and John gathered their bounty and smiled as their little girl approached Ben. They were glad to see Sarah heed their words, because they had some presents to hide. And the distraction was a welcomed surprise. "I'm glad to see her do something besides messing with her phone," John said. "She's been so distant lately." "Yeah," replied Martha. "Teens will be teens." She gave Sarah a quick wave and entered the house. "Hi, Mr. Foster," Sarah greeted with a quick flutter. Ben was straggling the ladder near his front porch and snapped in another staple to a strand of lights. He nearly fell off when he heard Sarah's voice. When he regained his footing, he looked down and uttered, "Oh, you startled me, little one." Sarah looked up and said, "Do you need help?" "My parents sent me over." He cleared his throat, pointed to a box on his porch, and muttered, "Well, darling, you could hand me those other lights in that box. It sure would help these old legs of mine." "All right," moaned Sarah. She grabbed the lights and noticed a red machine about the size of a lawnmower resting by the sidewalk. She glared at the contraption for a few moments before Ben's voice brought her back to reality. "Don't mind that, sweetie," he said. "That's just the snowblower." He lowered his hand and grinned. "How about those lights?" Sarah ran over to the ladder and reached as high as she could until Ben grasped the lights. She watched as he stapled one strand at a time with his shaky hands. "This is going to take all night." The access line with the plug dangled beside Sarah like a slithering snake, and she pulled out her phone and began recording. "What are you doing?" Ben asked. Sarah sighed. "I'm recording this moment so I can upload it to my TikTok channel later." She lowered her voice and mumbled, "My friends will be so excited to see how boring my life is." "What's Tiki Talk?" Sarah wrinkled her eyebrows. "Really? Don't worry about it. It's just a social media thing." "Ha! Don't worry," said Ben. "I know all about social media. I watch the news all the time." He continued stapling the lights and began humming Jingle Bells. The access wire kept creeping along and got tangled around Sarah's boots. She stumbled a bit, but didn't fall. Once again, her attention turned to the snowblower. She grabbed the cord and placed the end of it in the machine's blades. "This will show him not to trip me again. This thing should strip all those lights, and then I can go home." She saw a lever on the control panel that said "on" and pulled it. With a soft hum, the blades engaged, and the loose wire was pulled into the machine. Sarah stepped back and positioned her phone to capture all the chaos. Ben whipped his head like a startled rodent and yelled, "Turn that off!" His words were cut short as the looped wire around his neck became taut and flung him off the ladder. His body hung in the air while the snowblower pulled against the stapled lights. He tried to break free, but his old hands didn't have the strength. He gasped for air, but none would fill his lungs. Within seconds, all the life in Ben's writhing body ceased, and his eyes grew cold. "Oh, shit," Sarah gasped, turning off the snowblower. "That was awesome." Later that night, Sarah awoke to flashing red and blue lights shining on her ceiling. And they were not Christmas lights. The police were on the scene, and Sarah watched through her bedroom window as the paramedics took Ben away in a black body bag. Sarah, 1,000 snakes slithered down Sarah's spine when she heard her mother's cry. She ran down the stairs as fast as her little legs would carry her, and found her mom and dad sitting at the kitchen table. "Honey," John said with a long, drawn-out tone, "you were with Ben this evening. Did you notice anything strange?" Sarah clasped her hands behind her back and mumbled, "No. Are you sure, sweetheart?" Martha asked with tear-filled eyes. "Well," Sarah started, and then paused to scrunch her lips. "I may have done something naughty." She walked closer to the table and leaned against the marbled countertop. John stood up, placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, and asked, "What did you do?" Sarah fumbled for the right words, but couldn't find them, so she turned her back. "It's all right," John said, looking at Martha. "If you had something to do with what happened tonight, we have to tell the police." "He's right, dear," Martha said. Sarah wrinkled her forehead, clenched her jaw, grabbed a sharp blade from the knife block that was right in front of her, turned, and slashed her father's throat. A thick stream of blood painted Sarah's pink unicorn pajamas, and her mother screamed. John grabbed his severed neck, fell to the floor, and choked on his own blood. "No!" Martha screamed. "What did you do?" Martha ran to John and held him in her arms as he breathed his last breath. When she looked at Sarah through bloodshot eyes, the last thing she saw was the glimmering blade as it penetrated her skull. The blade bit strong and true, and as it pierced Martha's brain, visions of her life flashed by like lightning strikes. And then darkness took her. Sarah gripped the knife and yanked it out of her mother's head. A weary smile crept upon her face as she turned to her phone that she had placed on the countertop earlier. TikTok is gonna love this. Suddenly, Sarah heard footsteps coming from the living room. She grew silent and heard the faint sound of bells jingling in the distance. Out of curiosity, Sarah tiptoed out of the kitchen and peeked around the wall to see a white-bearded man wearing a red suit with black boots putting presents underneath the tree. "Santa?" gasped Sarah. The jolly man turned and bellowed, "Ho, ho, ho!" Sarah ran towards him with the knife held high, and his tone quickly changed. "Ho, ho, ho, oh, no." He grabbed her arm and took the knife away. "Put that away. It's Christmas." "No, you big fat bully," Sarah yelled. "Let me go." Santa looked at Sarah's blood-soaked pajamas and said, "Something tells me you've been a naughty girl this year." I knew I should have checked that list twice. I guess I'm getting a little lazy. I should have listened to Mrs. Claus. She's always right. "What did you do, little girl?" "I'm not telling you," Sarah snapped. He held Sarah's arm and walked into the kitchen, where he discovered the cold bodies of her parents. "Oh, no. You have been a bad girl. What should I do with you?" Well, this is Christmas, and I think you should come with me until I fly to the police station. You must answer for this crime." "No!" Sarah yelled. "You can't make me do anything." Ho, ho, ho. I'm Santa Claus, and I will do what's best for you. He grabbed Sarah's arm a little tighter, placed a finger on his nose, and they disappeared up the chimney in a puff of magic smoke. They appeared in Santa's sleigh on the roof, and with a quick dash, they were off flying with his 9 reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen, and Rudolph. Sarah pulled out her phone and pressed the record button. "No one is going to believe this." They flew around for a few minutes before landing on the next roof, and Santa quickly delivered his gifts. When he emerged from the chimney, Sarah folded her arms and scoffed. "I thought you were taking me to jail." "Ho, ho, ho," huffed Santa. "I plan on doing just that after I make a few more deliveries." He laughed, and Sarah couldn't believe that his belly did indeed shake like a bowl full of jelly. It is Christmas, after all, and time is of the essence. He grabbed the reins and said, "Now, hold tight. Here we go. Ho!" Like a twinkle from a Christmas light, they were off again, soaring through the clouds. Sarah expected to feel the freezing temperatures, but was toasty warm in the sleigh. Santa's red gift bag was neatly tucked in the back seat, and Sarah decided to have a peek. She gave Santa a double take to make sure he wasn't watching her, and untied the thick golden rope around his bag. She raised her eyebrows when a blinding light began to show itself through the opening. The warmth and power caressed her soul. It was a strange feeling. What is this? Ho, ho, ho. It's the Christmas spirit of love, Santa said with a warm smile. It's something that you have closed your heart to. He turned and watched Sarah close the sack. Her droopy eyes and frown showed the beginnings of sorrow. I think people sometimes forget that I know all and see all. It's so annoying. Ho, ho. Santa reached up and patted his white, fluffy beard and continued. What you need to understand is that while this world is filled with hate, there is also hope. Hope to overcome hardship and faith to do good. I believe you have that warmth in your heart. And all you need to do is admit your wrongdoings and let the healing begin. Everyone can change. No words came from Sarah. She sat stone-faced and seemed lost in deep thought. Santa nodded and steered his beloved reindeer to the next house. Not to worry, Sarah. Forgiveness will always be there for you when you want to accept it. As Santa landed on the snow-covered roof, he stood next to the chimney with his red sack of presents and gave Sarah another cheerful look. I won't be long. Our next stop will be the police station. And then your healing can begin. Ho, ho. Sit tight. I'll be right back. He touched his nose, transformed into a dazzling, colorful mist, and swooped down the chimney. He filled the stockings hanging by the fireplace with candy and doodads, and placed a handful of presents under the sparkling tree. A plateful of peanut butter cookies caught his eye before leaving. Oh, my favorite, he beamed. How can I say no? Ho, ho. Santa ate every last crumb and drank the full glass of milk that was left for him. Most people believed that he preferred chocolate chip cookies, but the savory taste of peanut butter was his weakness. Time was getting on, and Santa snorted his way back up the chimney. When he emerged from the smoky funnel, he fell to his knees, and his rosy face turned red. The snow-covered roof was painted blood red, and the reindeer were gathered in a circle, snooting and grunting. As the reindeer parted, Santa saw Sarah sitting on Rudolph's mutilated carcass, eating his red nose. A slight trickle of bright red ichor flowed down her chin. It does taste like a cherry. Santa rose with a clatter and yanked Sarah off of Rudolph. What have you done? His face shook like a bowl full of molded pudding. I thought you could change. I believed you had some good in your heart. Ack! His words were cut short when Sarah quickly slashed his throat with the knife she found in the front seat of the sleigh. Santa should have left it at Sarah's house when he took it from her. But mistakes are habitual. Santa's white, fluffy beard soaked up the blood like a thick towel and turned crimson. His jolly-filled eyes twinkled and rolled back into his head, where visions of Christmas pasts grew dark. His jingle bell knees quivered and gave out, and he collapsed in front of Sarah like a deflated blow-up decoration. Sarah's eyes danced in the bloodshed twilight, and she laughed with a bubbly voice. Ha, 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 ho. Merry Christmas, you fat bastard. You thought you knew what I needed? Well, screw you. She grabbed her recording phone that was positioned on the sleigh, held it up, and said, "To all my TikTok followers and the non-believers, the spirit of Christmas can be killed. That's how you do it, my friends." Sarah stopped recording and noticed the goosebumps forming on her slender arms. Jack Frost was wickedly biting into her bones as the warmth of the Christmas magic faded. Her pink, blood-covered unicorn pajamas were no match for the freezing temperatures, so she ran over to Santa's rotting corpse, removed his heavy red coat, and put it on. The coat was too big for her small frame, but in an instant, Sarah's insides stopped quivering, and a circle of warm, magic dust swirled around her. All at once, the jacket adjusted itself to fit her body perfectly, and Sarah felt a power that only dreams could bring. She heard children's voices and saw their dreams as they slept. Sarah automatically knew who was good and who was bad. There was an overwhelming sense of joy, and she swatted it down with a gust of hatred. Well, who would have thought? Sarah watched as the reindeer instantly took their place by the sleigh, and Prancer gave her a look that would kill most people. "What?" she asked, shrugging her shoulders. "I've always been the love of my own life, and it's only fitting that I become the Queen of Christmas." Sarah knew exactly what to do. Christmas must go on. There was no question about that. But what form would it take? She pulled out her phone again, hit the live stream button on TikTok, and laughed as the number of viewers crossed the billions. With the device held high to capture the perfect angle, Sarah smiled a devilish grin and rejoiced. "It's time to spread some Christmas fear,"